She's just amazing.
Welcome to the Great Reboot. I'm Tori Ryden, and as you can see, we are joining you via Zoom, and we're taking this reboot very seriously, taking it internally ourselves. As you know, towns all over the place, states all around this country are in lockdown, which is really a very scary term. A lot of people wondering, what does lockdown mean and when is lockdown going to be over? A lot of people are starting to really look internally as well. And that brings us to our very special guest here on the Great Reboot, Peter Panagore, the Reverend, spiritual advisor. He's an author, TV and radio host. And again, I'm going to bring in the spiritual counselor part right here. Peter, welcome. And I'm sure you've been getting a lot of questions about the word lockdown and what it means. It's frightening, but very necessary as well to see that this pandemic ends sooner than later.
Hi, Tori. Thanks for having me here this morning. I appreciate this a lot, the opportunity to have a conversation with you and with a wider group of people. Yeah, I'm in lockdown. I'm in isolation in my little studio. I'm not going into the grocery stores and I'm not going into the post office. I'm isolated. And I think that the curve that they've been talking about, it's all of our responsibility to flatten the curve out in order to not overload the medical care people at the hospitals and the urgent care centers and those places, so that there are enough beds for those who actually need them. The lockdown is scary economically for a lot of people. The numbers are going to come out today, millions of people unemployed. That's the prediction that I heard this morning on NPR. I don't know what that's going to be like, but I know that my neighbors and some of my family are not working right now, and that's a hard thing for a lot of people. So how do we deal with all this kind of stress? One of the things that I've learned over many years of meditation practice is that when we meditate and we go within ourselves, we release our stress and we find an inner peace that allows us to deal and face with the terrible aspects of life with a more calm interior. And if we're all approaching each other with a calmer interior, then it's going to be easier for the collective of the people, all of us together, to be able to bring about a good resolution to this terrible, terrible situation. By not exacerbating the problems. So lockdown's a terrible thing, but here we are, Tori. We're talking on Zoom. Lots of people are connecting over Facebook. I'm out on Facebook all the time. There are videos about people putting up music. We're all trying to socialize and have a conversation while we're in our isolation.
You know, it's so fascinating, Peter, that what we're seeing is, and you were hearing it, so it's almost boring to say this, but the less we can be together, the more we are. And it just seems that we are all craving that. I mean, how many times are you just wanting to kind of wave out the window and have somebody return the wave, or, just to feel that you are really connected, because it does feel like, oh my gosh, am I ever going to see people again? And I think that people are beginning to, really panic. So let's talk about meditation and what it takes. Some people have never tried it and it sounds almost daunting or woo-woo. What does it take? I know that maybe some people say through prayer, but can get you into a meditative state. What is it? And maybe you can take us through the steps that people need to do to meditate.
Sure. Meditation and prayer are kissing cousins. The form that I first studied and learned is a combination of Zazen, TM, and Roman Catholic centering prayer. It's actually, they called it centering prayer. That's what they came up with. And the Trappist monks that taught that utilized meditation techniques and an opening and directing of the heart to the holy in order to create a combined sort of practice. That's what I practice. But meditation itself has been tested among atheists and agnostics, and it has biological results. And if you focus on a word and let your breath guide that, you become calm. It's just a physiological thing that happens. And the more you practice it, the more you rewire your brain to have the strength and capacity to get better at it, like anything else we do. So
Mhm.
you can practice it as prayer, which is what I do, but I also have the same side effects as someone who practices it not for prayer. So all those physiological things of calming down, those really actually work. So it's simple. Meditation is a simple practice. The difficulty comes in fortitude, in determination, and daily practice, because it collects in inside yourself, sort of like you fill up your reservoir every morning, and the more you fill up your reservoir, every day there's a little bit left over at the bottom of the reservoir. So it never goes dry as long as you keep practicing. So here's the technique that I use, and a simple single word, one word, is better. Shorter is better. I use, because I'm Christian and by faith or culture,
Right.
I use the word Jesus. It comes from a much larger prayer in my Orthodox background, my Greek Orthodox background. But you can use a single word. I started with a number 6. That's the number. When I first began, I used a number. You can use a number if you want to. You can use the word love or bliss or peace. But here's the thing. It's like having a dragonfly land on your palm. As long as you keep your palm steady and smooth and quiet, the dragonfly will stay. You can even move your palm with the dragonfly on it, but if you try to grab it, you kill it or it flies away. Meditation is exactly like that.
Wow,
So,
that's a beautiful way of looking at it, Peter. I love that.
well, thanks.
Really nice.
The 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 word of the meditation is the dragonfly, and your breath is your palm. It's a very gentle movement. I repeat my word from here. I follow my word down to my belly, and I breathe it back out again. Same over and over and over. I've done this prayer 10,000 times, 10,000 times. No exaggeration.
And for how long? For how long do you do that? Kind of as
Well,
part of your.
it depends. Some days it's 5 minutes because that's all I have. Some days it's 30 minutes because that's what I have. Mostly it's somewhere in between there. Um,
Mhm.
it's the regular practice of it that makes the difference. It's the only way to chase words out of your mind is to use other words. You can't. It's the Zen Buddhists call it the monkey mind. The mind
Uh,
is always running around with thoughts, and our thoughts are always in language. And the only way to defeat language is with other language. So if you got an earworm, like a song stuck in your head, for example, um, you can't get rid of it. How do you get rid of it? You have to replace it with something else. You
right.
have to replace it with other words or another song, and that's what meditation does. So I use this word, I repeat it over and over and over again, and when thoughts come into my head, I don't try to push them out in meditation. I simply return to my breath and to my word every single time. If my mind runs off on my grocery list or how lonesome I am or whatever the situation is in our world today, the single thought banishes it, but trying to push it away does not. So my feet are flat on the floor. My palms are on my thighs. I'm sitting in a chair that has a straight back, so I don't have to use my muscles to support my back.
Right.
I close my eyes. I shut my phone off. I darken the room, and I close my eyes and I breathe in my word and out my word, and in my word and out my word. And what can happen if you're able to focus on your word is that the word falls away and your only focus is witnessing your breath. And as long as you don't try to think about that, you just witness your breath, you get to continue to do that. As soon as your mind thinks, oh, I'm witnessing my breath, you're out. And you got to go back to your word again and repeat your word over and over and over again. And what happens physiologically, if you do this, is you just calm down and calm down. And then there's a residual piece. In Zen, they talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness arises from meditation. And so when you're practicing a mindfulness with intent in your meditation, so that during your daily life, you're more likely to be mindful. You carry the peace that you gather in your belly throughout your day. And if you gather this peace in your belly in the morning, you get to carry it, it gets to carry you through the day. I've been doing this for 40 years. I started in 1977. I've been I can't say a daily practitioner because sometimes you get sick and you can't practice. Mostly a daily practitioner for all these years. The accumulation of the piece is gradual, but it's permanent. And so you never lose what you gain in meditation. You always start from where you left off.
Unlike physical, when you're working out, and if you leave it, you kind of have to start again.
Right.
So I guess I'm curious. I love that this can take as little as 3 minutes. Really, and it's you time. Me time. It's our time. It allows us to treat people better and not rush to judgment. Maybe. I mean, does it just kind of suppress all of that so that you're a little bit more accepting?
Yes, it suppresses all of that, and it starts with it actually not being me time. It's the opposite of me time because the practice of meditation strips the me away. So the more you practice over decades, the layer by layer you pull apart what Thomas Keating calls the false self, or one could say the ego. And so you strip little bits of this away, and the identification of the person, me, becomes less. And so your approach to the other is less judgmental. Can I say that? Can I put it in that language? I think of this guy, this Jewish writer named Martin Buber, who talked about I and thou being very much the same, and it's very similar to what I think it's in. I want to say the Upanishads. Thou art that. I am you, and you are me, and that kind of is a side effect of meditation. Is it strips away the self, and it becomes more accepting of others because you become accepting of yourself.
Isn't that kind of where we find ourselves now, that we are staying home for the betterment of all, and not just me or I, it's all.
It is. It's everyone in this together, and it's the maybe. And I'm not a historian, but I think it's the first time in the history of the world, of all humanity, that we're all suffering the same cataclysm. This is a cataclysm, and one of the positive things about cataclysm, if there is such a thing as positive, is that it's an opportunity to shift the culture into something new. And so here for the first time in the history of the world, all the scientists around the world are working together. They're all working on the same project. Okay, maybe not everybody. Some men and women are doing other stuff, but globally, in every country, leading scientists are working as a unit. Countries are trying to work as units. Definitely people on a local level and on a national level, we're working as a unit to protect the humanity of us all. And that's a major cultural event that it's funny. It's so individuated because we're all in isolation, and yet it's so collective because we're all doing it together. And I'm thinking about all the family in New York and my friends in New York and people in New York City. They're living in these 2-room apartments, stuck for 15 days, not going out. If anybody needs to learn to meditate, it's the people who are super confined, who are I get going inside. When we go inside ourselves, we actually find freedom on the outside. It's counterintuitive, but that's how it works.
It's interesting that if you take it back to the physical, we are able to look out. We're so fortunate where we live. We can look out and see trees. We can look out. You're right near the ocean. I'm near the lake. We have that visual outlet, really.
Oh, we do. And I take advantage. I go outside. I don't see anybody because I live in a rural place. And if I do see someone, we keep our distance, we wave, we might talk from a distance, some of the neighbors and I, neighbors and me, but mostly we're by ourselves. That's so here we are with this opportunity for those people who are spiritual and those people who aren't spiritual, to turn inward and to find some sort of for those who aren't, physiological resources inside ourselves, and for those who are, those physiological resources and a deeper spiritual connection. Because on the larger scale, on the macro scale, when you go inside, you discover that the interior is vaster than the exterior, because God is infinite. And once one taps into that, then one has access to the divine presence. And like I said, you don't have to have that aspect in meditation. That's just where I'm at.
I've got so many questions for you. I want to start with, well, first of all, let's look down the line at this and this whole consciousness, and we're all in this together. And it's, I mean, people, the shift is here, and people are changing and have changed. And is this a forever shift?
Well, there is a forever shift going on that's kind of below the radar, and it involves science. And I'm part of that shift. And so in the 1960s, cardiac care came online, and medical science started raising the dead in their surgeries. And as technology advanced over the last 50 years, lots of people have been resuscitated. And the surgeons in those rooms started asking questions, because the people were coming back telling stories of the other side. Mm-hmm. And so on a global scale, for the last 50 years, medical technology has been driving spirituality in an increasing capacity across cultures and languages. And there are an estimated 10 to 20 million near-death experiencers in the United States today. And that number is true globally, country by country. And now, because of social media,
you. Yeah.
Including me, right, including me. Twice, true. Well, we're talking cross-culturally now. Because of Facebook, there's a group called Near Death Experience. It's got 40,000 members, and people from every country in the world are there. And because there's Facebook has translators built in, we talk to each other. And
really?
We're just, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
All right, is there any information? So it's called, just in case somebody's watching and has
Sure.
an NDE.
Near-death experience. And
right,
you don't have to be an NDE to lurk. People ask questions all the time.
Oh, good.
NDEers.
Okay.
It's very social.
So would you, I mean, you and I have talked many times, and I'd love for you to share some of, your stories about, maybe you can share and maybe comfort people about who you saw, who you talked to, the messages you received. I know it's deeper than what we're talking now, and maybe we can have another show with you specifically on near-death experiences. But I think it's really important to share that piece, because there are a lot of people who don't believe in it. And I would just love to give you this space to be able to talk about that.
Well, thanks, Tori. I'd like to. What I was going to get to before we talk about that is that we're discovering, many of us in the NDE community, that love is the message. Whether you're Southern Baptist or Greek Orthodox or Zen Buddhist or Muslim, the message that we're hearing from each other globally is community and love. It's the message Jesus gave: love thy neighbor as thyself, love God above all things. It's as simple as that. And as from my friends who don't believe, that's okay. You don't have to believe me. It's not a requirement, but I do know that the science is going on globally at major research institutions, hospitals, and universities, examining this very issue. The University of Arizona, University of Virginia, University of Alberta, and others around the globe have taken notice. Stony Brook, UNE, scientists have taken note, and they're trying to delve into what is consciousness. And the big question that they're trying to search out is, does consciousness arise in the biology, or does consciousness inhabit the biology? Does it arise in the brain, or is the brain like a receptor that the consciousness inhabits? And the truth is, nobody in the science community knows. They have speculations and theories, but people are examining that, and I'm all for that. I want to convince the non-believers with evidence, with empirical evidence, and in my experience, it's true because I've been there. But I can't prove that to anybody. It's totally subjective. I want objective evidence.
You know, it's interesting. When you just said that, I was reminded of a book that I read. First of all, yours is fantastic. We'll talk about that in a moment. But Dr. Eben Alexander here is a medical doctor who had a near-death experience, and he wrote a book about it. And I believe, was it made into a movie as well, Peter?
I don't think it's a movie yet, but who knows? It may be.
Yeah.
But it's definitely on its way to. Well, definitely on its way somewhere. It's going globally. It's a bestseller, and what makes Eben Alexander's book so great is that he was a Harvard-based neurosurgeon, agnostic Episcopalian, who had encephalitis, which is brain death, and they brought in all his buddies to check him out. And he had a near-death experience. Nobody expected him to come back at all from brain death, and yet he came back, and his whole life changed. I know him. I've spoken with him and had lunch with him, and he is a deeply committed, empirically based near-death experiencer who's combined these two worlds to the best of his ability. And as far as I know, he's given up his surgery, because this overtakes one's life.
Yeah, it overtook yours.
Yeah, it overtook mine. I was an English major undergrad on my way to graduate school in architecture with the hope of doing building design and writing for like Architectural Record was kind of my combination dream. But yeah, once I died and came back, everything changed. I came back a different person. And
you were hiking with your friend, with a buddy of yours, and you were out west. Maybe you can give us kind of a truncated version.
Sure. I was ice climbing in Western Canada between Banff and Jasper, not less than a day's drive from the Arctic Circle, basically. And it was March, and I made a poor choice in my equipment. My partner was a lead technical climber with certification, and we were on a famous climb. It was my first climb. I made a mistake. We slowed our climb down so that by the time it was sunset, we were at the top of the climb when we should have been off the mountain altogether. And I got hypothermia and frostbite as we struggled through the night for survival, which was a harrowing experience of fear of death, fear of dying, driving me for hours and hours and hours for survival. But in the end, on our last pitch, just at the very top of the last rappel, the rope got stuck and I died of hypothermia. And I crossed over, and I was carried by an intelligence that is beyond my explanation up the proverbial tunnel, and I was left in a greater illuminated darkness of a place of paradox and dichotomy and metaphor only. I can only talk about it metaphorically, so everything I say about it's an approximation. And I was a consciousness and remembered that this is who I was. I was never Peter. I inhabited Peter, and I was 10,000 times bigger than Peter. I expanded to my full size, and I had there was no thing about me. All of my senses were combined with my brain. My mind, I had no brain, I had no body. I was an orb of consciousness. And long story short, I had a direct encounter with the divine. I went through a hell of my own making. I self-judged. I was forgiven. I was known from the moment of my creation and beloved. I saw all humanity as beloved. I asked to come back for the sake of my family, my parents. And I should add that I was infilled with this oneness of being. all these things that we keep separate, like beauty, love, joy, truth, knowledge, understanding, wisdom, awe, and the list is long. They were all one thing. And I chose to come back. I was told I wouldn't come back to the life that I had been living. And that well, the moment I came back, I regretted it.
I was going to say that must have been the most difficult decision, to leave something that's everything to come back to just a piece
Yeah,
of.
except for that, that's true. If I had understood what I was saying and asking, I probably would have made a different choice. But what I did understand is that the eternity of love that I was empowered with was, when I say eternity, I mean it's like all the love you've ever felt in your life times a septillion, all the love that's ever existed on Earth for all the history of humanity, and every single animal that's ever loved another animal, all that love times a septillion is not enough. From what I have experienced of the eternal nature, always loved, always will be loved, am loved at that level all the time, every single human being. And I saw all of the suffering of humanity living under the veil of the illusion of reality of the world. But I also saw at the same time their utter belovedness by the divine. But I saw my parents suffering, and my sister had run away and vanished from our point of view. My mom had had a terrible breakdown that lasted decades, which is why I was out west and not back east. I was running away, and I couldn't let him go through life knowing that the length of my life was the wink of my eye. So I understood that my mortality in comparison with my eternal nature was that fast. And so I thought to myself, well, if it's that fast, I can endure that. I can go back and live in that hyper limited reality of suffering and senses, and endure here long enough to help my parents live their lives. And when that's done, I get to go. Eventually, I get to go anyway.
Right.
And then the second time I had a heart attack in 2015.
And by the way, you are so physically fit. You eat so well. I mean, let it be said that here you are, this very healthy specimen. I think everybody was shocked to hear when you had a heart attack. So continue with that part of the
Yeah,
story.
I ran 5K the day before, and I got winded, and my heart felt funny. I was like, geez, this isn't a good run. And but the next morning I went to yoga class, and I was late, and I set up in yoga class, and we should add in, I was a vegetarian for 20 years of my life. So
Right.
anyway, but it turned out I had a congenital genetic thing. This is the same. My granddad died on my first birthday when I was a kid of the same widowmaker heart attack. My dad would have died, but they life flighted him in a helicopter in the early 80s to UMass Medworcester and shot him up with an experimental coagulant. And they saved him. My sister, who had run away, she died of this when she was 56, 57. And then so at 50, 56, there I was, same deal. And when I was in the catheterization lab, the doc said, you probably started building a plaque in your body the day you were born. It's just a genetic thing. So I was ready to go. I mean, I've been praying since the day that I came back in 1980. I had a secret second prayer. I did my meditation, but I also asked God every single day to take me home.
Wow.
And then the first opportunity I had to go, my granddaughter had just been born. My daughter had just left her morally injured ex-Marine who came back morally injured. And the baby's the baby, and who's going to be there for them?
Wow.
So I said to my wife, any chance I get, I'm going. I know you're going to be okay. And so this is my opportunity. I went, and then I thought about my son and my daughter and the grandbaby and my responsibilities to them. and I chose to come back. Knowing again that the length of my life is a wink of an eye, and my whole meditative practice. Okay, so why do I practice meditation?
Right.
I polish my interior lens so that I get to see the holy divine, who I miss with all my heart, more clearly. I try to make space in me to bring that here for my own sake, to survive here. And in that process, I discovered that the radiance of the light that you collect inside yourself comes through you. And a lot of that light comes through people naturally. Whenever you look in someone's eyes and you see the little sparkle of light, and then you look in the eyes of a dead person, there ain't no light sparkle there. And yet they're physiologically, they have not changed at all. And so there's a natural capacity for humanity because we are made of this. That's what we are. And so I decided to pursue it with all my heart, mind, and soul. First thing, always that's the number one, so that I can survive here emotionally, psychologically, and have the strength to do what I have to do while I'm here.
And then it's not all about you. It's
Oh,
about everybody else. It's about sharing, what gifts you've been given to get that, to have that glimpse. When people say the eyes are the windows to the soul, they are, aren't they?
oh yeah, they are. They are. And I came back the first time. So my immediate regret upon the next morning. Well, all right, I'll catch up. So the next morning, we get off the mountain. The rope gets free after I come back. My friend thought I was dead. He thought he was going to die. We got off the mountain. We self-treated for hypothermia because I was a ski patrol and first responder, and so we brought our temperatures back up according to the rules.
Right.
And then we ended up in jail that night for a little while, and then we totaled the car. And then I had to hitchhike back, and my partner took a bus with our skis, and I carried the climbing gear, and I was the hitchhiker. So I had hitchhiked all over the place. So it wasn't I knew what I was doing. But that morning at sunrise, I immediately regretted my decision to come back, and so that's when I began that prayer. But I also got this calling that was unavoidable. It was like a roaring Niagara Falls inside me, screaming at me, speak this, message this. And I was like, no freaking way. I have no word. I don't even understand what happened to me. I know that this is real, but I have no language. So my job has been to share this. That's my job from the day I came back.
When it happened to you, this was not what people were talking about. People were not, I don't know that I'd ever heard of near-death experience until, the 80s or 90s. So when it happened to you, you must have felt terribly alone. Like, am I the only person who's ever experienced this?
That's exactly how I felt. I was terribly alone. And I didn't hear about near-death experience till 6 years later, when I read Raymond Moody's book Life After Life. And then when I read that book, in the introduction was done by a guy named Professor Ken Ring, who happened to be at UConn up the road from me at Yale. And so I called him up on the phone and I said, I'm a third-year student, div student. I've got 5 minutes of your time.
And we just quickly say Yale Divinity School. I don't think we said that that's where you decided you needed to go there and pursue this.
Yes, I had an independent study for 3 years at Yale Divinity School. I took all of the required courses, but the dean of admissions agreed to be my independent study professor for 3 years while I did a cross-university study of mysticism. So I decided that the only way I was going to figure out what happened to me was by reading the group that I thought were my closest peers, and they were all the dead mystics of the Western classical tradition of Christianity, but also the others too from around the world, but primarily the West. And so that's what I was doing at Yale before I was going to go into the monastery, which is what my intent was, to go hang out with people who were like me. and be able to pursue this with a greater depth. My wife, meanwhile, I met this woman and I got married, so no more monastery.
Right. Makes it difficult, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I called up Ken Ring and he told me, yeah, you've had a near-death experience. And so from that point on, I had language for it, but I still didn't have a community. I didn't have a community until about 5 years ago when I came out with this book. In a kind of a big way, I found the International Association for Near-Death Studies. And through that group, found tens of thousands of people like me. And
I think it's important to tell people. So Peter's book is called Heaven is Beautiful. And I ended up, I gave a copy of it to my father as he was dying. And, I think it's really important for people to read what you went through. I think it provides such comfort, Peter. And, when people are at that place, it's a beautiful, beautifully written book. When people are home right now, they might be able to download it. Can they get it, an online version of it, Peter?
Sure, it's available in Kindle and Nook, and I've got 5 publishers globally, and it's an audio book too, so you can get it there too. Bestseller Audible, but it's Amazon and everywhere else. Thank you for saying that. I wrote the book with intent to provide hope for the hopeless and comfort for the frightened, because from my point of view, heaven is the only real place there is, and love is the only real commodity that there is, and that's the only thing you get to carry with you, and that all the love that you give away in your life and all the love that is given to you in your life, you get to keep all of that. That's all of your treasure, and that's transcendent treasure. It's immanent here, it's present in the world. And if I were the divine and gonna set up a species that's intelligent and give them an innate spirituality, I'd give them the most important thing there is, and that's the capacity to love and be loved. And so there's this treasure that's available to every single human being all the time, everywhere, that is the secret of life. It's like the whole universe is secretly made of love. I know that below qubits there are muons, and I don't even know where the physics is now. I'm having a hard time keeping up. But underneath it all is love powering the entire thing.
You see the love right now in the fight against this pandemic. You see the doctors, the nurses, people are showing up. People who are doing, making phone calls to people who are making food for other people. I mean, there's so many opportunities to share love that just goes beyond what we've been doing before this. It's almost like BP, before pandemic, and then AP, and feels that way.
Yeah, it feels that way. And even the people who aren't out there doing the volunteer work, the people who are isolating themselves in their apartments or their homes for their own sake, but also for the sake of the entire community of humanity. It's not just America fighting this thing. It's everybody everywhere. It's all of us together in this. All of us.
All of us. And I guess that's kind of a beautiful part of the love message. It's all of us.
It's all of us. If you strip away, I'll rephrase that. In my studies, I learned that the mystics, the global mystics, whether Rumi or Kafir or Julian in Norwich, when they transcend to the state of union, they go to the place of non-being where there is no language or even concepts. And so when they come back, they contextualize their experience in the language that's available in their culture. But in the divine experience, there's only oneness of being. And there are different expressions of this, but all humanity is made from the same substance. We're all made of this light, this love, this consciousness that pervades all the world, and more than the world. It's not just us here. It's much bigger than this little tiny planet on the edge of this remote galaxy. There's a lot more going on in the universe. But here on this planet, we're all made of the same substance. DNA-wise, we have a great variety, but we have all got Homo sapien DNA, and underneath it all, we're all made of the same core substance, and that's the divine holy love.
Well, it's a great place for us to kind of wrap this up. I want to see if you have any other suggestions. Meditation, Heaven is Beautiful. Are there any other places people, and maybe resources that you'd like to share with people? I didn't ask you this ahead of time, so I don't want to put you on the spot, but if people come to a place where they just are, there's a lot of anxiety right now, and a lot of people freaking out and ramping up this way, and meditation is one way that you've told us will really help to level us and amp up the good. I'm just curious if there's anything, is there an email people could send you? Would you like to receive emails? Can they follow you somewhere if they have any more questions? I mean, you're so soothing, Peter. I just want to give people a way they can reach you further.
Well, thanks, Tori. My website is peterpanagore.love, peterpanagore.love. I'm on Facebook a lot. I consider that my ministry, more or less. I guess that's what I would call it. On Facebook, there are a bunch of videos that I've been putting out. YouTube, all these links are at peterpanagore.love. I'm available for counseling. I have a counseling service that's global in its reach. I counsel the grieving and the frightened and the spiritual and the mystic and near-death experiencers. I tend toward the more spiritual end of things, but I have pastoral care experience with family systems dynamics, family system therapy, I'm sorry. So I'm available for counseling. You can find me primarily on Facebook, and my links are at peterpanagore.love.
Just one last thing, if you would share with us, any other messages you got when you met with the divine? Is there anything?
Yeah. The summary word that I struggle to hone this whole thing down to one single syllable, and that's love. And I know that it's not a new word in our conversation, but it is the word. That love really is the thing. And love is complicated. Love is not a simple thing. You can love one person and that costs you the love of another person. So it's a dynamic, but really it's the way we treat each other. It's how we treat each other in this pandemic will set the tone for the coming century. Really, because globally, if we treat each other with kindness and compassion, that's going to translate into what happened in New York City after 9/11, when the whole city rallied round and racism vanished in New York City. Everyone was a New Yorker. And that's lessened to some degree in the last 20 years, but there's a residual there. There's a through line of that culture. We can do that now. And love is the key. That's my one word.
Let's hope it's everlasting this time.
Amen.
Peter Panagore, thank you so much for joining us here, and you're a delight. And Heaven is Beautiful. Check out Peter Panagore on Facebook, on YouTube. Last name Panagore, in case you don't know how to spell Peter Panagore. You are lovely, and I just wish you all the best. And I'd like to continue. Pick up where we've left off. Maybe we'll check back in with you in a couple of weeks and see how things are going, and maybe hear some more messaging and see how this love is blossoming.
Tori, it's always my pleasure to talk to you. I love talking to you. Do it anytime that I can. And thanks for asking me, my friend. I appreciate it very much.